So hey guys, so here is the long-awaited video on Pope Francis's decree, Fidducia Supplicans. Have a copy of it right here, printed off, read the whole thing, took some notes as you can see. Before I get into it, into the topic of blessing, Pope Francis' decree on the blessing of same-sex couples, I thought I would go into a bit about the Bible and what it says about it, as well as some of the historical arguments against it, because I'm going to be honest, I've dealt with a lot of people online who, aside from Pope Francis' recent statements, completely different, a lot of confusion on that one there, but also what the Bible actually has to say about this. And yeah, it needs clarification desperately. So for starters, and Pope Francis indicates this in his decree itself, the Bible does say that yes, homosexual behavior from a biblical standpoint is a sin, and a serious sin. Even in Pope Francis' decree on the blessing of same-sex couples, it says that these relationships cannot be legitimized or validated in any way, even in the blessing itself. In fact, and as for the Bible, this is what it says. So this is Romans verses 1:26 to 27. For this cause did God deliver them up to shameful affections. For the women have changed from the natural use to that which is against nature. In like manner, the men also, leaving the natural use of women, having burned in their lusts one towards another, men with men, working that which is filthy, and receiving in themselves the recompense which is due to their error. Romans 1:26 to 27. Furthermore, and I know a lot of people try to argue the word homosexuality does not appear in the Bible itself. There's a problem with that. For one thing, the word, here's the thing, the Greeks did not have that word in their language. The word homosexuality is an English word. So we're looking for what would be the Greek equivalent of it in the New Testament. And we actually do find it in 1 Timothy 1 verses 8 to 11. The word is arsenokoitoi, which means men better, basically. And from what we can tell, it only appears in the Greek language. It seems to have been created by the Apostle Paul himself, and it seems to come from Leviticus 20:13, which is the Old Testament condemnation of homosexuality. That pretty much everyone agrees that that's what it's talking about. And it's listed in 1 Timothy. It is listed among numerous sins which you will lose your salvation for if you do it. So it is, biblically speaking, the biblical tradition clearly condemns it. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. I also want to address some other arguments I heard online, saying that, basically arguing that Paul was culturally conditioned. I heard this recently from someone. He said that basically the argument is that, it was a very hyper-masculine society in ancient Rome. Paul had to condemn this thing in order to be socially accepted by the Romans, because the Romans and Greeks were not comfortable with homosexuality, so Paul had no choice but to condemn it. This is factually false. That is a factually false argument, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. For one thing, the ancient Greeks and Romans were pretty comfortable with homosexuality, truth be told. So, for example, we have the works, especially the Greeks, we have the works of Sappho, for example, who wrote lesbian-esque poetry. In fact, her name, it's actually from her that we get the term lesbian, her name, because she was known as Sappho of Lesbos. And that's how that all came about. We also, furthermore, we know for a fact that it was common in ancient Greek society in the ancient world for men, older men, to take on younger men as romantic partners. The old term for the older men was was the Erastes, and the younger man was the Eromenos. In fact, I've taken courses in university that even point out that these were adult consensual relationships between men. The ancient Romans, by comparison, were a little bit, they weren't quite exactly the same, but yeah, they were pretty well on board with it. There is ancient Roman poetry indicating that there's ancient Roman poetry for weddings that implies that the man and the groom had previously had male lovers. So what the Romans would have been mainly concerned about was basically who would have been the dominant partner in the relationship, essentially, if I might use a euphemism. And they wanted the dominant partner to be a Roman citizen male, basically. And for what I can tell, because the courses I took in classics, just completed my double major in history and classics. The source that seem to indicates that, yeah, and they talk about it a lot. The ancient Greeks and Romans were quite comfortable with this sort of thing, and in fact, even Plato in a symposium. This is like the height of Plato in a symposium. He's like the height of Greek morality, philosophy, basically, highly educated elite. He was basically quite accepting of homosexuality, incredibly. There is even indications that he talked about that it being a true love, and that how that kind of love between two men can actually elevate you to the divine. So the idea that the Greeks and the Romans, especially the Greeks, had a problem with homosexuality and that Paul had to just give into the hypermasculine society, is basically false. There is a little bit, there's a little bit more of an argument in that regards to the transgender community in ancient Greco-Roman society. The Romans really did think that think that was strange. They even had a term for it among the Greeks. The term was kenitos. They didn't like them. They thought they were strange. That said, even among them, there was a group. There were a religious cult, and I'm not using cult in a negative term here. I'm using it as a very generic sense, as in a minority religion or religious gathering that worshipped Cabelli, that actually required the priesthoods to be trans men, basically. So, and the Romans banned their citizens from joining it, but it was a respected cultic practice and religious practice, at least to an extent. It went on. The Romans thought it was weird, but like, say, hey, do your thing, and hey, you're worshiping a goddess. It helps bring us prosperity. We'll let non-citizens do it, was basically the attitude. At least among elites. But as for the argument that Paul was giving into hypermasculinity when he made these statements, or that he was just saying, "Oh, this is how things were." No, he's implying that it was gravely sinful, both in the Old and New Testament, because he lists it as being a sin that if you commit it in the New Testament, you will lose your salvation, and he made it very clear what he meant by that in Romans. But yeah, so that is where things stand biblically, and I'm sorry if I'm offensive to anyone here. I do not intend to talk about this very often in most of my YouTube videos, but sometimes I do need to touch on these topics. But yeah, biblically, I'm sorry. And it just got to the point where, like, I just heard so many bad arguments defending the idea that Christians can be practicing homosexuals that completely contradict the Bible. They clearly do not know the history. They clearly do not know what they're talking about. I'm sorry. It just needs to be addressed, because you're using bad arguments. Doesn't matter what you think of it. Doesn't matter if you're for it or against it. The arguments that I've heard being used. And I would not be able to retract this video. I'm just stating historical, biblical facts of what does the Bible say. What was Paul's views on it? Is the argument that he was just leaning into the local culture and just keeping people happy at the time? Does that have any merit whatsoever? And I'm sorry, even as a historian, even if today, this second, I stopped being Christian, fully accepted it, there would be no way I could honestly tell you that that is the case. And I've even heard some more, I'm sorry, I had to be blunt, but absurd arguments, saying that David and Jonathan were in a homosexual relationship in the Bible, like because Jonathan gifted David his bow and were very close with each other. I got close guy friends, nothing romantic. Something if they died, I would be deeply devastated. And that was just a common thing, like give your bow. It means guest friendship in the ancient world. Even more absurd, the idea of Ruth and Naomi, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. There's a desire to see those type of relationships where they simply don't exist. And even if they were mentioned, and if they did happen, the fact of the matter is, David did other stuff that was not so great in the Bible. That David did and Jonathan did, it doesn't necessarily mean it was okay. David committed adultery later on, and it was wrong, biblically speaking. So, but yeah. Anyway, so that's where it stands biblically. It just does not, and i.e. it doesn't. But yeah, so I thought I would look at like the decree itself now. So this is Pope Francis's decree. I copied it out. I'll spare you like the long read. I'm not going to read over the whole thing. You can look it up on the Vatican website. Fidducia Supplicans. Whatever side you take on it, it is worth reading over it. But let's talk about what it actually says. So, this declaration remains firm on the traditional doctrine of the Church about marriage, not allowing any type of liturgical rite or blessing, similar to a liturgical rite that can create confusion, i.e. implying marriage, basically. So, like, no, Francis cannot bless same-sex couples in the traditional liturgical sense that most people think of it. And it is not a retraction of historical Catholic doctrine on the matter. So that is to a certain degree, degree true, both for like the Pope splainers, if I may call them that. They are correct in that regard. That is the stated declaration. That being said, what is Pope Francis actually blessing? So we know we're not so that's what he's not blessing. But what is he blessing? So here's what so he's basically saying, let's change the idea of what blessing means. One must also avoid the risk of reducing the meaning of blessings to the point of this view alone, i.e. they can only bless that which is objectively good. So he's changing the meaning of blessings. Lest we expect to say more condition of a simple blessing that are called for in the reception of the sacraments. Such risk, we broaden this perspective further. So basically, so that's another argument people make, is that you can bless sinners all the time. And by the way, even critics of this decree will admit that and acknowledge that. So, on one hand, yes, Pope Francis is not saying we're allowing same-sex marriage. To any people who are attacking Pope Francis on that matter, or any liberals praising up Pope Francis, that's not what this decree is saying. That is true. He is saying that we do need to change the meaning of blessings. But the question is, what exactly is he blessed? Is being blessed? As you can tell, this section here is like the biggest one, because this one actually says what is actually being blessed. With this horizon outlined, namely that you can bless things that are not objectively good, is what he's arguing. Namely, like calling God to just give general blessings on things. It appears the possibility of the blessing of couples in irregular situations, and for the couples of the same sex. So he is saying, yes, you can bless same-sex couples. Um, but in what sense? Um, it should not be a fixed ritually by ecclesiastical authorities to avoid producing confusion. So it is not a liturgical blessing. So there's a famous picture of Father James Martin doing a full-on unofficial, basic liturgical blessing of a same-sex couple. So that violates this, even there. Even as far as this goes, he's beyond even that. But what is the blessing actually asking for in this case? A blessing may be imparted not only has an ascending value, but also involves the invocation of a blessing that ascends from God upon those who, recognizing themselves to be destitute, need of help, do not claim a legitimation to their own status. And so that's like the defenders of Pope Francis among traditionalists would probably focus on that. But this is what it is actually being blessed. But who beg that all that is true, good, and humanly valid in their lives and their relationships be enriched, healed, and elevated by the presence of the Holy Spirit. So basically, I just made a bit of a satire of this a moment ago. So let's compare this. And Pope Francis does say, you read the decree, that you cannot claim, you're not trying to bless the sin itself, but it does add the question. You're not trying to bless the sin itself, and it is a sin according to a Bible, and according to this decree as well. Even this decree says so. But I kind of made a bit of a satire. And so, okay, let's see what else can be blessed in this way. Because basically, the concept of sin in Catholicism and Christianity in general, biblically speaking, is brokenness. There's something that is inherently good. There's something that's sin is something that is something inherently good that is broken, basically. It's a crack. It's an absence of that which is good. And so basically, so the question is, does this violate what Isaiah says? Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. For starters, people are already taking this decree. The decree itself violates its own terms. People are already using it to justify blessing of same-sex couples. Whatever Pope Francis' intentions were, the decree by its own standards should be rescinded. Absolutely, because it is causing the scandal. It is in of itself causing that confusion in that world. Only individuals can be blessed, and not the couples. Secondly, let's open this to other situations that can and should be considered inherently sinful. Sorry to anyone who thinks that such relationships are not. Biblically, that's what it says, and that's what the decree says, and we got to go with that. So let's say in my satire video I made on this, I suggested let's bless human trafficking, because hey, human traffickers are trying to make a living. They're trying to support their own families. They're just doing it in a way that is inherently sinful and wrong. And we should bless what's good in that. Or hey, people who the Nazis were the concentration camps were very patriotic. Patriotism is good. Is that okay? Or hey, devil worshippers and the satanic coven that worships Satan, that does child sacrifice, believes there is a God and there's a supernatural order of things, and it's great that they believe that. If I said let's bless these things, but only insofar, like privately, and only bless that which is in them is good. If I was making arguments for that, you would probably be calling me out and saying, like, no, the very fact you're even suggesting this, it shows you're being weak. It shows you're not doing what God wants. So this is kind of like a decree of Pope Francis. This is how like a lot of post-Vatican II decrees work. And I was actually just at a traditional Catholic conference the other day, and it kind of described it. They start off with a very orthodox statement, and then dismantle that statement to make it being worthless, basically, in the end. So they exception it to death, essentially. So, look, there are going to be absolutely same-sex couples that are going to, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're only blessing that which is good. Look the other way. and it is going to be used to seek legitimation of it. That is the fact of the matter. This decree is really no different than, look, think of how the Anglican Church for years has blessed like divorced and remarried people. So if you're a traditional Catholic watching this, think about how for years the Anglican Church was blessing same-sex couples. I know it's been a long time, has been blessing same-sex couples and divorced and married couples, and how it was horrible, how horrible this was, and how many Anglicans were coming over to the Catholic Church because of how sinful it was, and they were scandalized by it. If you look at the Anglican theology, guess what? That's how they understood it, basically. Like, everyone had different concepts of marriage. We're not. I'm just thinking of like the marriage of current King Charles III and Mrs. Parker Bowles, and the blessing they had. They had a penitential rite for their past wrongs and infidelities, acknowledging that which they did, but they blessed the civil union in a certain way. It was a more liturgical form of blessing of that, but that is kind of what is being done. Hey, you can watch it. You're only there to like bless that which is good in that relationship. And there's even a penitential aspect to it, to acknowledge that, hey, there was wrong here, that was not so great. Isn't that wonderful? This is kind of, it's just like a low, I'm sorry, but ironically, it's what you got here. And this decree is just a low church, less liturgical version of that, essentially. You're basically saying, hey, what was done was wrong. There's a new relationship here. It may or may not be valid, but we're going to give it a blessing and a civil authority. And hey, and if you show up to such a celebration, hey, you're only doing it to acknowledge that which is good, that relationship. It'd be like, this would be like me. It would, like, if I went to like a neo-Nazi rally or something like that, and I just said, hey, I'm going there to acknowledge that which is good and patriotic in them. I'm not there to support their genocidal mania. People would rightly call me out as being a nutcase and delusional, mincing words, and I'm like they call me out as being utterly two-faced and dishonest. And they would say I was insane, like there's no speaking to me. Yeah, they'd be right. So the fact of the matter is, this decree does say, the fact of the matter is, homosexual relationships, biblically speaking, it does say, it does call them that which is filthy and a punishment from error. What exactly, and that is how those relationships are described biblically in the Bible. And so, bless all that is true, good, and humanly valid in their lives. And because keep in mind, this decree is talking about not just them, but it talks about the blessing of couples in irregular. It's because this is not just talking about people who are being blessed. It's not about an individual who's, I want a blessing that's for what's good in my life. This is not what they're talking about. They're not talking about an individual asking for a blessing. Pardon for my ranting. I'm kind of off the cuff in this. But this is the possibility of blessing of couples, not individuals, of the couples of the same sex. So we're blessing what is good in a couple, in a same-sex relationship, or another irregular relationship, to ask for that which is good, true, and humanly valid in it. From a biblical standpoint, nothing. It is inherently sinful, and this is not even that, but even divorced or married, from a biblical standpoint, acknowledged by this decree, that would be adultery. So even same-sex couples aside, it's talking about even divorced or married, it is still adultery. What is humanly good and true and valid, humanly valid, in an adulterous relationship? If I may. I still think that there's enough sanity in society still that most people would say, yeah, it's just completely messed up. Like, if there's anything that's good in it, it's like, yeah, it should just be hacked. You can find it elsewhere. There's no point in salvaging it or blessing it. At least I hope there's still people who think this. But it's not just same-sex relationships, keep in mind, it's about adulterous relationships. Like, if you're married and your spouse was cheating on you, um, and they went together apart from you to get a blessing from Father, not a liturgical blessing, not and they're still married. He still acknowledges he's married to you, but he asks for the priest to bless all that is valid, true, and good in that relationship. What would you have to say about it? Not asking for the priest to legitimize it, just that. I think most of you people watching would have enough sanity to say that that is a garbage idea and is absolutely absurd. Yeah, I leave you with this thought. Anyway, God bless, and remember, read Romans 1:26-27 for a clear understanding. And yeah, you can't bless adultery, you can't bless sin. I'm sorry. God bless.